some fun. So today we have a great panel for y'all. We're going to be speaking about the issue of medical cannabis. It's an issue that I personally care a lot about. I never thought I'd be involved in cannabis once I graduated college. And, but a few years back, my father was diagnosed with ALS and really got into the issue. He had a lot of pain. The current options are not very good. Many of you probably know that we have a huge opioid epidemic here in the state, and it's my opinion that we just need better options for people who are suffering in this state. So we've got a all-star lineup here that's going to discuss a broad range about the medical implications and then also talk about it from an investing perspective. So I would like to thank our sponsors for tonight. We had Nova Copy and FH Design. They made this possible. And with that being said, I'll turn it over to Mark Adesso here.
Thank you. My name is Mark Adesso. I'm an attorney at Waller, Lanston, Dorch & Davis. I specialize in capital markets and corporate financing. I got involved in the cannabis industry in a legal capacity, professional capacity in 2014. Took a number of companies public, including one that's now called General Cannabis Corporation. They were the first corporation to say we have land in Denver and we're growing marijuana on it. We got that company public. You can buy a share of that company today. So from that time, moved down here, moved from Wall Street down here, and I've gotten to know the panel here and the people working in this industry, which is pretty incredible, considering that cannabis, at least the marijuana side of the cannabis plant, is illegal in Tennessee. To that point, to my right is Rob Nikos. He is a professor at Vanderbilt University. He is the nation's leading cannabis legal expert, and he teaches at Vanderbilt. You know, it's pretty amazing. Not someplace in Colorado, not someplace in California, right? Oaksterdam. Yeah, Oaksterdam University, right? Vanderbilt University. Next to him is Jeff Parrish, my colleague Jeff Parrish. He's a senior healthcare and government relations attorney. I think I got that right. He is also a professor, an adjunct professor at Belmont University. To his right, we have David Hairston, who is the founder and chairman, I believe, of Safe Access Tennessee, as well as a board member of the, correct me if I get this wrong, the Tennessee Medical Cannabis Trade Association.
Yes, sir.
All right. And then finally to his right is Brett Williams, who is a hedge fund manager and an investment advisor. So the way that we're going to do this is that Rob will speak a little bit about the federal legal landscape. Jeff will talk a little bit about the state of the state sort of legal landscape. David will give a more boots on the ground, sort of what's going on right here in Tennessee and in Nashville, as someone who's actively working with people. And then Brett will sort of give the investment overview where he's putting his money. So with that, I'll let Rob take over.
Thanks, Mark. My name is Rob Nikos. I teach over at Vanderbilt, including a course this semester on marijuana law and policy, a course that the university has supported with enthusiasm and that I get a lot of students in. I've spent a lot of time working in this area. Actually finished up a textbook on the area just last year. Today I want to talk about a couple of federal issues regarding the regulation of marijuana. And I stick with that term rather than cannabis just because that's what it's called under the law. It's a legal term for the cannabis plant and all the drugs taken from it. And I'm sort of old school in that fashion, so we may shift the terminology up here. I want to briefly talk about a big announcement that Attorney General Jeff Sessions made last month regarding enforcement of the federal marijuana ban. I don't want to spend too much time on that. I think you're probably all familiar with it. And also, I don't think it had a big impact on the ground. Instead, I want to use that as sort of a springboard for talking about a couple bigger picture issues. One of those is the relative responsibility or blame, sort of depending on your preferences, for federal marijuana policy between the Attorney General and the Congress. Ultimately, I want to suggest to you that if you've got a problem with federal marijuana policy, don't blame Jeff Sessions, blame Congress. It's their fault if you are dissatisfied with that policy. And the second thing I want to do is I want to discuss some of the proposals that are now before Congress to talk about what could Congress do to try to lessen the tension between state and federal law and maybe open the door a little bit for states to engage in reforms in this area. So to begin, last month, about this time last month, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that he was rescinding some enforcement guidance that had been issued by his predecessors in the Obama administration. All that guidance did is it told federal prosecutors that it's probably not a good use of your time to go out there and enforce the federal marijuana ban against people who are acting in compliance with state marijuana reforms. He rescinded that particular guidance. Now it's important to point out that Jeff Sessions didn't tell federal prosecutors, hey, go out there and start arresting people for growing and selling marijuana. And in fact, over the past month, nobody has done that. No United States attorneys have actually done that. No one has gone out there and initiated a crackdown against the state licensed marijuana industry. So it's important to keep that in context, that what the Attorney General did, it got a lot of attention, didn't have a lot of impact on the ground, and yet it sparked a lot of criticism. There was a lot of criticism of the Attorney General on this particular issue. People called him a hypocrite for abandoning federalism, something he championed as a senator from Alabama not so long ago. They criticized him for wasting federal law enforcement officials going after people who were using and selling marijuana when they could be doing other things, focusing on other crimes. They criticized him for doing something that was out of step with public opinion. The public overwhelmingly supports medical marijuana reforms, and a large majority of the public across the nation now supports the legalization even of adult use marijuana, even of recreational marijuana. So lots of criticisms levied against the Attorney General. I think there's some validity to these criticisms, but to a large extent, I think they are misplaced, or at least really, if you're dissatisfied with the state of federal marijuana policy, don't blame the Attorney General, blame Congress. And why is that? Well, a couple different reasons. One is that the Attorney General is actually plays only a small part, bears only partial responsibility for federal marijuana policy. And let me give you an idea of that. So Congress, when it passed the Controlled Substances Act back in 1970, banned marijuana outright. And it empowered the DOJ, and the Attorney General is the chief of the DOJ, to go out there and prosecute people who violate that ban, people who possess, cultivate, and distribute marijuana. But it's important to recognize that it also empowered sundry other individuals and agencies to do the same. In other words, the DOJ doesn't have a monopoly on the enforcement of the federal ban on marijuana. Let me give you just a few examples. I know a couple of people here are working with the VA. The VA, the Veterans Administration, has its own policy with respect to marijuana and whether its physicians can actually recommend the drug to patients. The Treasury Department is the department that is responsible for whether banks can actually do business with the marijuana industry. That's not Jeff Sessions' job. Lots of other federal agencies play a role in this. Transportation and Security Administration is the one in Homeland Security that determines whether you can carry marijuana on a plane with you from airport to airport. In addition, Congress also empowered you and I, private citizens, to enforce the federal marijuana ban through civil RICO actions. And in several states, including Colorado, Massachusetts, and Oregon, state licensed marijuana dealers have been sued under civil RICO, a federal statute, for violating the Controlled Substances Act. They've been sued by private plaintiffs, not by the Department of Justice. So to a large extent, the Department of Justice has only limited ability to turn off the federal ban, because that federal ban can still be enforced by, and has been enforced by, a variety of other agents. So again, don't necessarily blame just the Attorney General. for any problems that arise between the tension between state and federal law. The other thing to think about here is a more principled level. Yeah, the Attorney General does have some power, it's true, to reschedule marijuana. But even that power is extremely limited, much more so than lots of people actually recognize. So under the Controlled Substances Act, Congress placed marijuana on Schedule 1. It empowered the Drug Enforcement Administration in consultation with the Food and Drug Administration to reschedule drugs. And you might think, well, why doesn't Attorney General Jeff Sessions, or maybe President Trump, or before him President Obama, why not simply, with the stroke of a pen, issue an executive order that says marijuana is no longer scheduled? It's off the controlled substances list, or maybe it's on Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, where it'd be much easier and legal under federal law to get. You can't do that. Under the Controlled Substances Act, for one thing, you have to follow very rigid procedures to reschedule a drug. And it works both ways. If you want to reschedule oxycodone, move it from Schedule 3 or Schedule 4 to make it tougher to get because of the opioid crisis, very tough to do. You have to follow procedures. You have to follow the science. You have to follow consultation with the FDA. Even when you do that, when it comes to marijuana, there's an additional catch. And that's that Congress cabined the discretion of the DEA. Basically told the DEA, you can reschedule a drug like marijuana, but you can't do so in a way that would violate international law. It's one of the few times where Congress actually adheres to international law. And unfortunately, if you support marijuana reform, unfortunately, international drug conventions require the federal government, because of this provision in the Controlled Substances Act, to move marijuana no further down than Schedule 2. Now you might say, well, hey, why doesn't the Attorney General do that? At least move it down to Schedule 2. That's not such a big move. Cocaine is a Schedule 2 drug. But it's not like you can go to some local dispensary and get cocaine for whatever ails you. It is a very tightly controlled substance under federal law. In fact, in all the 31 medical marijuana jurisdictions in the United States, the 30 states plus the District of Columbia, none of them would satisfy all the regulations that are currently applied under federal law to Schedule 2 drugs, the producers and distributors of those drugs. So that would be a minor move that the Attorney General is empowered to make if you follow through all the steps and so on, but it would still be a very small change to federal law. So ultimately, I find myself in the odd position of defending someone I thought I'd never defend in Jeff Sessions, and I'll let you know my priors on that front. But I think in some respects he's right here. People are criticizing him, but he's basically saying, look at the rule of law. I am the Attorney General of the United States. I'm the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States. I am not the Supreme Legislator. So don't expect me to change the content of federal law. You want federal law changed, that's great. Go to your congressperson. I'll oppose you, but I'll respect whatever decision they make. I think that's what he's basically saying here, and I think there's some credibility to that. That ultimately, if you're dissatisfied with federal policy regarding marijuana, and there are lots of reasons you might be, blame Congress, not Jeff Sessions, or Eric Holder before him, or any of the other attorney generals before him. The second point I want to make here is, so what could Congress do? It's interesting, in fact, that the fact that Jeff Sessions rescinded this enforcement guidance in some respects has put more pressure on Congress to act, because they now fear that people will actually be prosecuted, even though they aren't, that they will be prosecuted under federal law, whereas before they were not. And there are actually a number of proposals that are being floated before Congress as we speak, dozens of them. And I want to just discuss a few of these in very broad outlines. I think they fall into three different categories. One concerns piecemeal reforms. And this would be things like Senator Warren's banking legislation, where Senator Warren, Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, has proposed to make it possible for banks to lawfully deal with state licensed marijuana vendors, something they can't do right now because of federal money laundering statutes. So there are a variety of measures that would do that would deal with discrete and individual problems. There's something to be said for these individually, But again, there are so many federal agencies, so many federal laws that deal with marijuana, that dealing with one piece of the problem doesn't really resolve all the different issues that now confront the states. You open up marijuana banking, well, those marijuana vendors that are licensed by the states still have trouble enforcing their contracts with investors, with suppliers, and so on. They still have trouble getting bankruptcy protections under federal law. They might have trouble getting legal services because of concerns about ethics guidelines and whether it's ethical for attorneys to provide legal services to them. So piecemeal solutions deal with only part of the problem. By definition, they don't deal with the entire conflict. A second approach that's really embodied in legislation like Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, his Marijuana Justice Act, is simply to cede control of this area over to the states. The Marijuana Justice Act, for example, would repeal federal laws governing marijuana. Basically get federal government out of the regulation of this particular substance. This would deal with the tension between state and federal law because now there would be no federal law governing marijuana. And maybe you'd be happy with that, but I think there's a reason to be leery of this particular approach. In other words, of handing the keys over to the states and say, take us wherever you want. We're not going to have any say over this. This has been done in some other areas of law, and it hasn't always turned out favorably from the rest of the country. Antitrust law, for example. There's a state action immunity under federal antitrust statutes when a state supervises some anti-competitive conduct. That's why you see today so many professions, from hairdressers on down the list. That's why you see so many different professions being licensed by the states, because they can basically use that state action immunity to immunize these different trades from federal antitrust scrutiny. Which isn't necessarily a good thing for consumers or even for those businesses when you have these licensing organizations that may foster some horizontal anti-competitive schemes. Same thing in insurance with McCarran-Ferguson. That has a reverse preemption provision in it. Basically says if a state is regulating the business of insurance, that will trump any state law that might interfere with that state law. May sound like a good idea. Maybe you want states to be the primary source of insurance regulation, but that allows some states to get away with things that might trouble us, like when insurance companies go out there and maybe racially profile in providing insurance. Maybe they don't want to deal in certain neighborhoods. They wouldn't be allowed to do that under certain civil rights acts under the federal government. But because of McCarran-Ferguson, we've turned off that federal prohibition. We've turned off that federal restriction. So there's the point here is that there might be a valuable role for the federal government to play in the regulation of marijuana. Maybe you disagree with prohibition, but there's something that the federal government should be doing with respect to this drug. Maybe in terms of testing its potency, maybe in terms of labeling. Maybe there's a role for the federal government to play here, and simply ceding control of the entire area to the states probably isn't the best idea. The last set of proposals really seeks to change the substance of federal law. It is not just repealing the federal marijuana prohibition, but it's replacing it with something else. And that replacement varies from one proposal to the next, but some of these proposals will go out there and replace federal marijuana prohibition with something akin to the federal regulations now governing alcohol. So the federal government will regulate things like labeling, they'll regulate interstate shipments, they'll regulate the potency of the drug, but they won't prohibit it outright. This, I think, is probably the ideal approach for Congress to take. Unfortunately, it's also probably the least realistic. Just because you have to get the buy-in of lots of senators and representatives to actually agree upon a new way of regulating marijuana. So if I were to read the cards today, I think what Congress will probably do is to take that limited ceding the issue to the states approach, probably pass a renewal of what's been known as the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer amendment. It's a spending rider that doesn't change the content of federal law. Instead, for the current budget cycle, it simply says the DOJ can't enforce it. I think Congress will rest on that sort of proposal that will make sure that the Attorney General doesn't actually try to crack down on marijuana, but won't resolve all of those other issues that I've mentioned, banking, contracts, ethics, and so on. I suspect that Congress will ultimately be satisfied with doing that, even if there are other proposals out there that might be a more ideal resolution of the conflict between state and federal law.
So, Rob, I have a question for you
Sure.
before you pass it off there. I think that was an excellent overview of both sort of future trends in the legislation as well as things that are happening right now, even possibly tomorrow, as soon as tomorrow. One question I had, the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer, is it possible it'll get extended to recreational cannabis as well as medical cannabis?
Yeah, so this originated back in 2014. It was then called the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment. And it basically says that the DOJ can't spend any money that Congress gives it to block the implementation of state medical marijuana laws. And it's been renewed every year since. It's in effect until tomorrow when the entire budget cycle runs out, the temporary stopgap measures. A federal court, a prominent federal court, has interpreted that measure to basically mean that the DOJ can't prosecute you if you are complying with a state medical marijuana law. So it immunizes any behavior that has to do with medical marijuana. One proposal that's on the table, and I don't know if this is going to make it into the compromise measure that's going to be approved tomorrow, but one proposal is to extend that beyond medical to include recreational marijuana. There's a chance that might fly because there's a lot of support for that and basically preventing the DOJ from cracking down on that as well. I think at the very least, though, I'm pretty confident that the medical marijuana provision will stay in effect for the next budget cycle, which is going to last a little bit longer than the last year.
So with that, I will pass it over to Jeff to give the state of Tennessee.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. My name is Jeff Parrish. I'm a lawyer at Waller, and I'm also a lobbyist. And my country daddy always asks, what am I going to do for my third strike? So we've got to wait and see how that turns out. Delighted to be here. This guy, I know when he's at Vanderbilt, he said all of that, and he's got 2 tiny little notes on his paper over there. So he knows all of that without reading it. I'm going to move along kind of quickly here, just so we get us all out of here. I am a lobbyist at the state legislature. That's where I work January through April. It's where I'm working now. And even though I'm pretty sure I'm probably older than this professor, I'm going to be not as old school as him because he's talking mostly about the state of the law, the federal level, the state of the law now. And so he can talk about marijuana laws. What we're going to talk about for the next little bit is how to get things done. And we're all here in Nashville, and these guys are doing stuff over here and trying to do stuff, and other people are trying to prevent them from doing things. And how to get things done, words are very important. And we don't use the M word if you're trying to pass medical cannabis. It is medical cannabis. It's not marijuana. It's not marijuana. It's not marijuana. It's medical cannabis. So I'm going to break with you there. Because we're trying to get this thing done this session in the legislature. What we're trying to get done is Senate Bill 1710, House Bill 1749. Some of you I know are intimately familiar with that. Senate side, that's Senator Dickerson from here in the Nashville area. The House side is Representative Jeremy Faison from way up in Upper East Tennessee. These guys are great, they're smart, they're passionate about this. Why might it work from a sponsorship? Why might it help us get things done? Dickerson's, he's a Republican and from a red state and with 27, I think, senators over there, Republicans. And he's a Republican, but he's for medical cannabis. He's the sponsor. He's not just for it. He's not just for it. He's the sponsor. He's also an anesthesiologist. And he happens to know something about medicine and pain issues and medicine. So that works pretty good for the sponsor there. Representative Faison, he was on the list of attendees, so I've got to be careful in case he's outside the door in my description of him. But he's from Upper East Tennessee. He's a no-nonsense guy. A lot of folks probably thinks he has lots of guns. He tends to be very, very conservative on most issues. It's probably fair to categorize him in the general notion of a right pagan meter tea party kind of guy. So why in the world is this guy for medical cannabis? Why is he the House sponsor? Because it came to his attention that he had some constituents that moved to Colorado to get medicine for their child who had debilitating health conditions. They left their family, their hometown, which is in his district, their jobs, their kids' school, their house, their livelihood, everything. They left and moved to Colorado. He went to visit to make sure it was on the up and up. He visited them. He visited other people who needed this medicine. He got convinced. He came back and he said in his Tennessee way, this ain't right. And we're going to do something. We're going to get something done about it. So when he's doing his 1749 in the House, about the bill, I'm not going to talk about it much because it's 74 pages long, I believe. The great news about the bill is it's from trying to get it passed, is that it's very narrow. Oils only. Lots of pages talking about the oils and all that. But it's oils only. No buds, no weed, no grass, no nothing green, no leaf, nothing you could roll and smoke. It's not it's not marijuana. It's medical cannabis. Oils only. So it's very, very narrow. And it's also would be, when this thing passes, very regulated. And that's stifling maybe, but it will help get it passed. It is so narrow, the product, oil, very regulated, meaning everybody's going to be in everybody's shorts, making sure they do everything right. The bill itself talks about the product, already said that, oil. It would create a commission of folks appointed by the governor, Speaker of the House, Speaker of the Senate, Lieutenant Governor. It's going to be made with, the commission would be made up of doctors, pharmacists, law enforcement, compliance types, 9 commission, lots of oversight, lots of reporting, lots of policing, if you will, the process. Licensure, it pays a lot of attention to dosing. The reason it's failed previously, because we got pharmacists in the legislature, and there's a senator in the legislature who's a pharmacist. There's 2 at least, and they know about dosing, and it's very important to them. So it addresses dosing, and it talks about there's limits on it, and these are just by way of examples. 30 milligrams per month if you got Crohn's disease, 35 milligrams perhaps if you got multiple sclerosis, that type of specificity as dosage. It would require first-time purchasers to consult with a pharmacist about it, side effects, a physical, literal consultation with a pharmacist. It delineates specific diseases and conditions that limits the use of the product. You can read the bill and see them all. You won't be surprised. Cancer, HIV, ALS, PTSD, on and on and on. It's a good long list, including some mental conditions like schizophrenia. It's permissive in that it lets lots of communities, it's wildly permissive except for the big 4. Everybody can opt in or out if you want to let people have dispensaries in your county, that type of thing. County commissions can just say, we don't want a part of this dispensing in our area. It has like a card. You part of the regulation. You have to use this card. It's got like chips and the most modern technology. When you go to get it from the dispensary, that keeps up with how much you've gotten, so that you can't get too much. It regulates the tiers of the business, if you will, of growing, processing, distribution, and dispensaries. So that's the bill. 74 pages of that. It's a work in progress. It's changing daily. There are discussions right now. People are drinking at Morton's, talking about what they're going to change about it tomorrow. And so that's what's going on with the bill. The folks tell me, including the sponsors, that the House is pretty much a given. This is a boots on the ground guy. He's going to know, or he may dispute that or not. But I am told from all the guys over there, including the House sponsor, that the House is a given. They got it. Plus, what I know, because I know her and she's told me to my face, and I believe her, Beth Harwell, who's the Speaker of the House and just happens to be running for governor, has embraced medical cannabis. She will be for it. That's huge if you're in the House, Faison's in the House. So, what's the problem? What is the impediment of getting something done? Mark, you don't have anything to do. Would you mind just passing that around? Sorry. There were 9 people, really possibly only 5 standing in the way of your state. If you're for this, I'm kind of preaching at you like you're for it. Some of you are bound to be against it, but I'm talking only medical cannabis here. Giving you the list because it makes a good demonstrative of, there are only 9 people on this thing. And those 9 people are on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senate Bill 1710, right now its only committee that it's got to get out of that we know of. Those 9 people are going to be, they're going to make or break it. It takes only 5 of those 9, an affirmative vote, yes. 5 of those people vote yes, it's out of the committee, and the general consensus is if it gets out of judiciary, which is a tough place to get out of on a lot of stuff, but if it gets out of there, you're home free. Tennessee will get medical cannabis. So the reason I hand that to you, if you don't know these people and you're for it, if you know them or don't know them, all you got to do is convince 5 of them. Don't take my job, but all you got to do is convince 5 of those people to vote this out of that committee. And the general notion is the bill then would pass the full Senate. I just told you the notion is the House is a given. So you'll have medical cannabis. Real quickly, in the school of how to get things done, there's also other mischievous people working all the time on how to prevent you from getting things done. And their job is really a lot easier. And I teach a class at Belmont about this subject matter and how to get things done. And we also have to talk about how to pass bills, that's what we're trying here, but also how to kill them. Bloody murder on these things if you're getting paid to be against them. If you're a lobbyist, against it, or you work for a department of the government, like the Department of Health, they're going to be against it. So you got to kill these things, and it's so much easier to kill bills than pass one. And the reason is they have to go through all these committees. Faison's got at least 3 committees in the House, it's been referred to, that he's got to get majority votes to get out of those committees. So you got to get a majority of these people to pass. If you get a job in one, if you're dead in one committee, you're dead, totally dead. Whereas to pass something, you have to pass out of every single committee. And this bill is at least 4, 3 in the House, this one in the Senate. You got to get out of all the committees and pass the floor vote in the Senate, in the House, and get the governor's signature for it to become law. So that's the Senate Judiciary. If you're for this stuff, wear those guys out, ever how you define that. Go see them physically, in person, write them, email them, call them, write old-fashioned letters. They love old-fashioned letters. They run from them, but they will read them, generally speaking. It's easy to delete the emails, and they get thousands and thousands of emails, so don't just rely on that. Why is this year very important, very, very important to this issue? It is quite possible that if it doesn't pass, medical cannabis doesn't pass this year, there's a possibility based on the governor's race, with all these people running, that you may not get it for 8 years. Here's one. I already told you, Beth's running for governor. She says she's for it. If it passes this year, everybody tends to be in agreement that Haslam will sign it. He may grumble about it or something. He'll sign it. Move on back to Knoxville. He may start dispensing it out of truck stops. But he'll sign it. Lots of the governor folks running for governor will sign it. There's one gubernatorial candidate that's a friend of mine I'm very fond of. I like her a lot. She's great, Diane Black. She will not sign it if it passes on her watch. She will not sign it. If she gets elected, she may do everything and be for everything you're for. And she may be your governor candidate. But if she's elected, she probably won't sign a medical cannabis bill. And she may get reelected. So that's the 8 years I'm talking about. So that's the reason the governor's race that's in the future, and we don't know who it's going to be, but it's important to getting this thing passed this year. So a lot of folks who are for it, they want it to happen, but they're nervous about voting for it. They got a great excuse because of the shadow of the nuclear meltdown. If Black gets elected, she won't sign it. So they got that to kind of run with. That's why the governor's race is important. My commentary, he's covered the federal side, I know nothing about it. But my commentary about the federal side is, all in the world it does is give these guys over there, by pointing in the right direction, something to hide behind. So that's the reason it's important that good things happen over the federal side, but they hide behind it. It gives them something to hide. Oh, I'd love to be for it, but there's this federal thing, and we don't want to be on a kilter with the feds. So there's that. Lastly, and I will be quiet, pass the mic, is there's a great article just yesterday, and anybody from Knoxville area, I'm not, there's a great guy over there, his name is Frank Cagle. He's the former managing editor of the Knoxville newspaper, generally conservative. Everybody knows, East Tennessee is very conservative, very Republican. As I understand, I don't know this guy, but I understand he ran a very conservative newspaper. He's a very conservative guy. He wrote a beautiful article. I'm going to leave it up here so you can just pick up a copy, because I'm going to distribute a copy of these. Some, intellectual property lawyer might get out of whack. So I'm going to forget that they're on the table. It's a great article. It's short and sweet. I apologize for the printing job, but you can look it up. The website's on the copy. He just wrote it yesterday. He is for medical cannabis. He's a conservative guy from East Tennessee, Knoxville newspaper guy. Part of his reckoning is because he's got cancer. He's fallen away to nothing. Nothing appeals to him. Food. He's losing all his energy, and he knows that there's some products out there that would help him with his appetite, discomfort, pain, etc. And he's meeting all these people. When you're hanging out in your recliner getting your chemo, you start meeting people you didn't know before. And so he's learning about it. Great article, great tool to use to try to get this thing done. And I'll leave that up here. That's the state of medical cannabis.
I think this one works okay. Everybody hear me okay? My name is David Hairston, and I'm a medical cannabis patient. I took medical cannabis today. It helped me walk into the building. For you see, I'm disabled with psoriatic arthritis. It's a rather painful condition. You may have heard of it with Phil Mickelson advertising Enbrel and other drugs on TV. And I can assure you, I have tried every single one of those FDA drugs to no avail. And it's been about 4 years now of living in pretty excruciating pain. So the standard of care right now is about 3 Vicodin a day for this disease. That is until you need the 4th one. Then you need the 5th one. Then you'll need the 6th one. It is unacceptable to me that we don't have more options for patients in this state. When I started out in this 3 or 4 years ago, I flew out to Oregon and got a medical cannabis card because I'm a conservative Republican. All right? I attended the Republican National Convention last year with Rick Williams here. It has my Tennessee driver's license number on it, folks. It is. We should not accept these federal rules at all. So let me tell you what I did. And I want to just share a little bit about the grassroots movement in this state for medicinal cannabis. As I became disabled and suffered through the first year of opioid dependency and how that goes, and until you've been dope sick, you don't know. You understand exactly why those people go to heroin. Wait until you run out of those pills, or you just up and decide you got to quit them. You'll be so sick, there's no choice at that point, folks. So I looked and studied the advocacy area, and I found this organization called the Americans for Safe Access, and I found a home there. It's a national organization. There's more than 100,000 patients involved in this. We have offices in Washington, D.C., and we're solely devoted to medicinal cannabis. I think we produce the best materials around medicinal cannabis. So I founded an organization called Safe Access Tennessee to serve the disabled patient. And for the first several years, we were just a small affiliate, just a crazy conservative Republican like me and a few suburban moms who had epileptic children. They happened to have gotten the CBD oil bill passed through our legislature. They're close friends with Jeremy, as am I. So Safe Access Tennessee has provided a mechanism for the grassroots and patients, very medically oriented patients. When we lost this past year, and I don't like losing. For you see, before I became disabled, I was a partner at a big international firm, and you don't lose. I don't come from a background where you lose. So I don't like losing. So we determined to do something a little bit different this past year. We became a full chapter of the Americans for Safe Access. So Safe Access Tennessee now has the full resources of the Americans for Safe Access in Washington, D.C. And I took a hard list at that list of senators right there. You know, you'll see you got Brian Kelsey from Memphis, John Lundberg from up in the Tri-Cities area, and a number of others. Art Swan is on there now. He took over for Doug Overby. So as we decided to become a full chapter, I traveled this state from Bristol down to Memphis multiple times over this past summer. And we had a long, extended conversation with our patients at the grassroots level. And there's a couple of things that we did. Number one, we decided we needed a symbiotic relationship with a trade association. We now have the Tennessee Medical Cannabis Trade Association. So if you're interested in investing in the cannabis space, it might be a smart move to become a member of that association, because they're helping funding a lobbying team, a PR firm, and the general campaign you see in place now. Safe Access Tennessee is a strategic partner to this trade association, as I promised the patients of this state, traveling the state. Now, we've designed 12 political action groups across this state. They're in a variety of areas. They are strategically designed to accomplish two purposes. Number one, so the patients of our state could be within an hour's drive of a meeting so they can meet other patients and talk with other patients and become involved politically at the grassroots level. And two, they're strategically designed to match up against that set of senators and the set of senators in the health committee. In the Tri-Cities area, which is where chairman of the health committee is Rusty Crowe, I have over 1,600 people in our grass. That's our largest group by far up in the Tri-Cities area. They will be engaged on the ground. And when you have 1,600, you can deploy 30 or 40 people in a political effort. 30 or 40 people in a political effort on a campaign, most governors would be happy to have that number of people on the ground. Now, we're not quite as large in other areas, but we have 300 to 400 people. Knoxville is a really critical area. Safe Access Tennessee Knoxville is a political action group there. And that's a hotbed for us, because we have, in that market space, we have Lieutenant Governor McNally, Art Swan from Blount and Sevier counties, Richard Briggs from Knox County, Becky Massey from Knox County. These folks are either on the health committee or very influential. Art Swan happens to be on both judiciary and the health committee. So our grassroots organization is designed to apply pressure on these politicians who have refused to date to do the will of the people. Folks, this is approved by 80% of Tennesseans. It is not a partisan issue. Most unfortunately, in my party, there are still people who believe these ridiculous lies that have been sponsored by federal bureaucrats around reefer madness and the gateway theory. They are outright lies. The Americans for Safe Access sued the Drug Enforcement Agency and made them remove that gateway theory lie from their websites. And yet we still have politicians in this state, like Diane Black, who will tell you they believe in the gateway theory. The problem is that gateway stops their profits. These are prohibitionist profiteers. That's exactly what's going on. They make money off of drug testing, and they don't want to lose their revenue source. And it is unacceptable to me as a citizen of this state to have politicians follow these ridiculous lies from the federal government. So yes, there's all policy and procedure, and you know, at a medical conference in the past year, we worked on a repeal of the United Nations regulations so we can undo. Remember, these federal bureaucrats, Harry Anslinger is the one who set up all these drug conventions and got us tied up in this catch-22. These people are not operating in our interest. Jeff Sessions is right, Congress needs to act. It is really unacceptable for patients that we're in this position. So Safe Access Tennessee is really the boots on the ground from a political process because we're going to hammer the hell out of any of these guys that vote no on this bill. We're going after them. So, you know, we need carrots, and we most certainly help with carrots in the legislature, and we need a little bit of a hammer, and the patience of this state, if need be, will be that hammer. I'd like to point out just a couple of things. Number one, we have produced this medical cannabis briefing book, and it is our intention to get this in the hands of every legislator at the state capitol. We had a medical cannabis task force this past summer. We were able to produce this and other pharmacological reports. The scientific evidence is off the charts. There is no reason to do more research, folks. It's a ridiculous excuse. Now we have some of these at the back. Jennifer, could you raise your hand? Jennifer's at the back. She is our membership coordinator at Safe Access Tennessee. I wanted to introduce Jennifer. If you're a patient or you have a family member that's a patient and they're not familiar with Safe Access Tennessee, please stop by and sign up. We'll get you on our mailing list and get you connected to our organization. We use this pamphlet as a fundraiser too. So please ask about that if you get a chance. So that's a shameless plug, but I really had to take the opportunity to do it because I know there's patients here in the room. I see Safe Access Tennessee members here in the room, and I know there are people who are hurting. And Ryan, ALS is in this bill. One of the handouts I think Jennifer helped Mark with was a press release around the bill, and you'll see ALS is there, as it should be, as is Alzheimer's, as is cancer. We have 300,000 people in this state with cancer, 100,000 with Alzheimer's. We have 700,000 people in the state with severe arthritis. 700. It's one of the highest incidence rates in the world, primarily because of our Scots-Irish heritage. The people of Tennessee need better options. What we don't need are excuses. So I will just share that part of the grassroots effort. Now, I'm a CPA by trade. I've done primarily mergers and acquisitions work, so I'll have just 2 or 3 points with respect to investing. If you're interested in the trade association, I'm happy to stay around after this meeting and meet with you and share a little bit about that. But I would share a couple of things just from an investment perspective. Now is the time to start lining up your first and second rounds of capital. That'd be one step of advice. 2, as you prepare business plans, don't think that cannabis prices are going to remain high. An extraordinary cost associated with medical cannabis and even recreational cannabis are the extreme high cost of prohibition. You see, it is just not the ignorance and lies of the federal government. It is the extraordinary cost that they drive up. At least probably 50% of the price point across this nation is tied up in prohibition costs. That's going to go away. The demographics are very, very clear that we're going to have cannabis in our country. I'd like to see medicinal cannabis. There are others who will fight for recreational. That's not my battle. But just be wary as you're preparing business plans that you don't just count on it being $20 a gram, because that ain't going to stick. This is now I'm a Republican, and I supported Trump. I went to the Republican National Convention. He strikes me as a guy that watches his ratings. What do you think? You think he watches his ratings? Do you think he noticed that the medical cannabis amendment passed in Florida was 71.3% of the vote? And while he had a great victory in Florida, he only got 49.1% of the vote. Trust me, this cat knows that. He isn't going to let Jeff Sessions do anything, in my opinion. The third point I would say is there will be quite a few ancillary businesses, and I would just note real estate, leasehold, corporate services, all the equipment-oriented things. There's a broad number of ancillary businesses that don't absolutely require you to get a license in this business, but will be probably quite profitable. And I would say, as with any business plan, you need a unique value proposition, and that would include either patents, trademarks, unique formulations, those types of, you need uniqueness in your business. So with that, I'll just put in one more shameless plug. Lisa, if you could stand up for just, I'm a member of this club, and I want to tell you what a great honor it is to introduce you to Lisa. If you're interested in membership in this club, please see Lisa. I've been a member of a club like this for over 20 years, associated with Club Corp, and I just recently rejoined here in the Nashville City Club. And I really enjoyed it. It's a great environment, and we have wonderful seminars like that. And with that, I'll pass it to Brent.
I'll take yours. One of them will work. Come on.
I think you're on.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I will very much second that. I'm a member of this club as well. This is my office every day. They get to have to deal with me or the pleasure of seeing me, depends on the day, every day. So being able to have this view of the city is fantastic. Being able to, I come from very much of the investment background, talking to people in this industry that are trying to invest in it, that are trying to get their companies built and trying to grow them is something that I focus on every day. And to very much further what he just said, to people that do the best and have the most success in the States are the people that are involved at the very early stages. So if you want to get involved now, then get involved now. If you want to wait until things become legal, realize you're going to have to go through a very complex process, and you will be a very good bit behind the curve compared to the other competitors that will be next to you in the States. So if you want to get involved in your lobbying, get involved in the Tennessee Medical Cannabis Trade Association or another one similar. I'm not associated with any of them, so I don't play favorites, but they seem to be doing most of the right things. Now, investments come in multiple parts. You're looking at state, you're looking at federal, and you're looking at government. State, we know where that is at. You need to invest with a lobbyist group to be able to start. Once it goes legal in the state, then you're well positioned to be the first adopter. Let's talk about America, the markets as a whole. Everybody, as you saw earlier this week, the markets went down, 1,500 points. You saw the news go crazy with that, saying it's the next Armageddon. If you want to look at the cannabis industry, we went up 2.5% on the same day the market went down 1,500 points. Not correlated assets. Now, they are very correlated in themselves, right? So when usually one company in the cannabis industry goes down, most of them tend to follow trend, and same way against the reverse when going up, but they don't follow the same trend as the market. So when the market had less than a 3% correction, still nothing to get freaked out about, the cannabis industry ended up going up. Over the last month, the cannabis industry has gone down about 18%, but that's not terribly surprising considering it went up 118% since November of last year to today. 118% return over the last 3 months. You're looking at 150% in the cannabis market over the past 6 months. The last time that we did this panel, the cannabis market has more than doubled since the last time you talked to me. There was some people that I got to meet with actually the last time that we met. They were wanted to meet with me afterwards, said, hey, I have some money to invest, where should I invest? We started talking, we found a couple of investment options that she had liked. She ended up going with the Kronos Group, one of my favorite producers out of Canada. She got into that company at $3 a share. She ended up telling one of her family members about that as well, and he did as well. It went up to $11 a share less than 2 months later. They got out and took their profits. Now, obviously, results not typical. That's a great thing to be able to have. But to be able to have those success stories from a panel that you're sitting at, the same panel that we had 6 months ago, or 3 months ago to today, just goes to show you the explosive growth that's happening in this industry. Now that 18% pullback that we've had in the past month, that's expected. When you have 100% burn up in a 2-month time period, let it cool off. I'm okay with that. But it not being correlated is one of the best parts. Not being correlated to the wider markets as a whole was one of my favorite parts about it. Some of the investments that I do like, let's talk about the public side, things that you should look at. I am a very firm believer that the medical cannabis industry has the ability to reach far more people than the recreational cannabis industry, especially for the near-term future. So when you're talking about dealing with pharmaceuticals, talking about dealing with the flower, the pharmaceuticals are going to have the ability to be able to reach and make a whole lot more profits when you coming to their clients. So whether or not they have one medical issue or another, there's still going to be the pharmaceutical aspect that is going to grow exponentially. GW Pharmaceutical, for example, we got to participate in their conference call earlier this week. Their drug Epidiolex is coming out for release in America as early as June 27th. That's an important date. If that happens on June 27th, that stock will shoot up exponentially. They're already at $125 a share right now. One of their main products is a cannabis-based remedy for the clients that they work with. So it's a pharmaceutical that's already trading over $100 a share. Their price target's $175 should that get passed. That's a 50% increase from where it sits today. Fantastic opportunity. The World Doping Association has recently lifted the ban on CBD oil. As of January 1 this year, athletes can use CBD oil and it is legal throughout the world, not throughout America. So there is different biotech companies out there that are looking to standardize the dosage for specifically athletes and healing and speedy recovery. Another company that I'm personally invested in the hedge fund is Lexaria Biosciences. They have the ability to put the CBD or THC in an orally taken capsule that hides the terrible taste of the concentrates, because that's an issue, and that works for not only THC, that works for vitamins with nicotine, because nicotine companies are trying to be able to get out of smoke, and it works with multiple other orally ingested vitamins that have a bad taste, but they're able to cover it and get it into your system. So companies like that, where they are on the cutting edge of the biosciences and they're able to hopefully do some mergers and acquisitions and sell some of their patents or have multiple streams of income, is the way of the future for the immediate future. Now, when you're talking about cultivation, for the public market specifically, I pretty much stay out of America right now. With the federal issues of being where they are right now, my two favorite are, as I mentioned, Kronos Group out of Canada and Aurora Cannabis. Aurora just did a huge merger, M&A, merger and acquisition with Canamed. Once that goes through, they will finally overtake Canopy Growth to be the largest cannabis company in the world. These are companies that are, by the time America comes legalized, are going to be light years ahead of us in the relationships that they have, in the distribution relationships that they have, and the growth partnerships that they have throughout the world. Because let's be real, growing cannabis in Canada is not the most efficient place to do it. It's incredibly cold. You have to pay to heat that building. You have to pay to cool that building. You can go do it somewhere like, let's say, Israel, one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world when it comes to agricultural sciences. This is the company that the country that invented the cherry tomato. Tomatoes and pot have very similar DNA structures. So the fact that they've been studying these things for this long and have this much success with it is a fantastic potential for growth in the future. Kronos Group specifically has come together and formed Kronos Israel, so they can form a 100,000 square foot grow facility in Israel to be able to take part in the very low cost of land, very low cost of energy, and very low cost of production, to then distribute that throughout the world, back to Canada, down to Australia, throughout Europe. So this is setting up for potential investment, huge gains in the next couple of years, because these costs have already been sunk, right? They've already spent the $100 million to be able to do this. So you see these companies that are fighting to be profitable. Yes, if you look at their earnings, they're losing money right now. And that's because the way that they're investing, they're setting up to be able to, once Canada goes legal in, let's call it July or August of this year, they still don't have a firm date set, that they can make the profits and be massively profitable from the investments that they've stuck out so far. Now, the public side is a part of it, and that's what I do on the hedge fund side. We also manage a lot on the private side. And that's where a lot of the explosive growth, the 1,000% returns, but there's also a whole lot of those that go under, because you have to deal with people, right? The people that are running these companies come from all kinds of backgrounds. They can be the tie-dye hippies that are coming out of Humboldt County and peace, love, and hugs all over the place, or they can be people that have a huge corporate background and have a track record of success in taking multiple tech companies public. You know, I know who I focus on investing with. One in the cultivation side that I work with is a very socially conscious company. They're called Justice Grown. They're based out of Chicago, but they have 6 different states that they're already working in. You know, they're looking to fund right now actively in Massachusetts. They have 2 dispensaries and a grow operation there that they're looking for funding in. And being able to have the branding that they're going with, and it's already set up in, you know, a medium size, let's call it mom and pop size shop, but that being set up through 6 to 7 different states is going to create a brand that when people travel, that's a great investment opportunity. There's one to further what Jeff said about the very strict regulations in the state. There's a company that I'm looking at called Empower Clinics that does specifically that. They come into and find states that have very strict cannabis regulations and very little cannabis education, because that is a huge part of what these people need, these physicians, not the clients, the physicians that are prescribing this. They work very heavily with the VA. Right now, they're valued at about 14 million. They have 15 clinics throughout the 3 states that they're operating in. Their chief marketing officer they just hired, his name is Peter McDonough from Diageo, the largest liquor producer, largest liquor distributor in the world. So these are people that have massive track records in clinics and advertising and finding ways to be successful, and they're not coming in and trying to prescribe medical marijuana cards. They're coming in and taking over pain relief clinics, chronic pain clinics, PTSD clinics, and providing those physicians with the education on how it could potentially fit, where the opioid would fit a little bit better, where the cannabis could fit a little bit better. And it's not just a company that's coming in and creating a medical marijuana card. When it comes to dosage control, that is a huge issue, because everybody out there says we're only going to have oils. But then when you look at it, how do you control the dosage of the oil? There is not one of the vaporizer companies out there that can accurately do that. There's a company that I'm working with out of Colorado. It's called Go Fire. Today, they just came across the New York Stock Exchange newswire hiring a former federal prosecutor on their board of directors. They're working on being fully HIPAA compliant and having all the technology to be able to not only accurately measure your dose control, but keep a reading of how much you use, aggregate that data, and then send it back to your clinic so they can use that research to then be able to better the care and better the treatment that they're providing for other people. So there's technologies and investment opportunities for all different kinds of things in this industry. What I want to caution you to look out for, there's a couple things. One is great products, fantastic solutions for problems that you shouldn't run into. I went down with Mark actually to Miami not terribly long ago for the Institutional Cannabis Investors Conference. And I was talking to the guy that came up with this really, really sophisticated process of removing all the pesticides out of his plants. So the THC or CBD that you were smoking in the oils was 90% pure, until you ask the question, why did you put pesticides on your plant? So it's a really good solution for the problem that he had, but that problem shouldn't be there should the grower know how to not put pesticides on the plant. Right? So there's a whole bunch of really great solutions for problems you really shouldn't run into when you're growing these things. And the potential for growth and the potential for the evolution of technology is continually evolving. There's one that I'm working with out of Georgia called Angstrom Technology that uses what he calls nanobots nanobots. It's basically Tony Stark's nanobots. They're perfectly spherical. They are incredibly small, to the 4th decimal point small. And they provide a full range of light spectrum, better than anything out there. And their energy output is water. It's not heat, it's not air, it's water. So that's a very fascinating technology. They're looking for just over $500,000 in funding to get that research off the ground. So in the private industry, there is a whole lot of opportunity to invest in companies that could potentially change the evolution of technology in this industry and Angstrom's technology, many other technologies as well. And then the private industry, in the public side, you see all the news. That's what you get to read about on the stock reports. That's what makes it a little bit easier to find. But working with companies like Viridian Capital, working with some of the better private placement funds out there to be able to provide you with multiple options for your investment. Whether you want to invest with me as a hedge fund, invest with me as a hedge fund, or whether you want to work in a private placement, and I can help orchestrate all of those and put the funds in whatever it is that you're comfortable with. Pretty sure now we open things up for questions. I'll be around after this to see if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, you want to say the name of your hedge fund? Give yourself a plug.
Yeah, Highwater Financial, I guess that would help. I'm based out of here. This is my office. So Highwater Financial manages the blended risk fund that we are invested in.
So I think we're pretty far over time, by a good 20 minutes. But unless Lisa starts making gestures telling me we have to stop, maybe we'll open up for just 1 or 2 questions that we can answer before we break. Okay.
Do we have any indication about how these 9 folks are going to vote?
Jeff?
It's going to be 5-4 one way or the other. That's how close it is.
So if we were going to focus our efforts on who we should call or who we should email.
Kelsey for sure. Senator Kelsey, he's the chairman.
Kelsey, okay.
He's not a no, he's not a yes, and I was just the Senate sponsor told me just last night that jokingly said to me, if I could bring Kelsey around, I'd never have to work again. That's how important it is to get this done. So sure. You got Stevens he's a pardon the expression, but he's just a hell no. So on this issue. So it wouldn't burn up as much time if you have limited time and resources. Certainly Kelsey and not Stevens, because it would be a waste. Probably a waste of time.
Any other panelists want to comment?
I would say Lundberg's going to be pretty hard to move. That doesn't mean I'm not going to try to move him. Stevens is a National Review conservative. There's no excuse for his position. I'm sorry. He should be there. So I would say if you have relatives or anybody that's a constituent in one of those districts right there, it would be helpful to put in the call no matter what.
They all
No
need
matter
to hear
what.
it.
Yeah.
They all need to hear it. So if you have time, and as he said, relatives and constituents, wear them out.
Yeah, particularly Memphis and Kelsey. So, I mean, I'm getting down to Memphis on the 16th. We'll have a safe access meeting there. And trust me, it will be in Kelsey's district. So our safe access leader in Memphis came up and talked about his 5-year-old with epilepsy with Brian quite recently, and we will continue to do that until we win his vote.
So now we're giving you homework.
Yeah.
I saw another hand in the back here. Go ahead.
Yeah, this may be a question for Robert. I actually read an article today that was published Monday that a credit union in Colorado had gotten federal permission to start doing business with some of the ancillary businesses around the dispensaries. So not exactly the dispensaries, but some of the accountants and people that were looking into their funds and things like that. Can you see that? Can you speak to that a little bit? And I guess the question is, does that mean the U.S. Treasury is starting to open up a little bit and allow more of these institutions to, I guess, bring that business in the 21st century?
Well, as I understand it, I don't know about that specific case that you're mentioning. It's a little bit easier to do banking with these ancillary businesses than the ones that are actually growing and distributing cannabis or marijuana, whatever you want to call it. I think Treasury is actually open to this. Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, has said just as much. He doesn't necessarily see eye to eye with Jeff Sessions about how to deal with marijuana, and he recognizes that having this a cash-only business creates all sorts of problems. So I think that the Secretary of the Treasury may be on board. He's as well has limited power to open this up and to convince bankers to enter the field. There's also the Federal Reserve, which is has a degree of independence, which also has to approve this. So there have been applications from I think Fourth Corner in Colorado, which was a bank that was going to be just designed to serve the cannabis market and state licensed businesses, and the Federal Reserve wouldn't give them permission to use the electronic payment systems, which is what you need in banking, in part because it said you're involved in an illegal operation. All the money you handle is tainted money, it's dirty money. So you need to bring a lot of people on board even to open up banking, but I'll have to look into the case you mentioned, because that may be a sign of things to come. I will mention that an increasing share of marijuana businesses are able to get banking services. It's been steadily increasing. Most of the big banks are still leery about dealing with these companies, because why bother? If you're U.S. Bank or Bank of America, why put your national licenses on the line to deal with this one little industry? But a lot of smaller banks in states like Washington, California, and Oregon have been dealing with the industry, and an increasing share of the industry has been able to get banking services based on that enforcement guidance, which the Treasury Department is responsible for on the banking side, and Steve Mnuchin is at the very least supportive of.
Could I just one build on that? Now, I'm not an attorney, so I can't give legal advice, but I am an old street smart CPA. Have worked with a lot of business people. So as you go about your business development, don't put cannabis or marijuana in your business name. That's what gets you in trouble when you go to the bank. Just call it something else and get it as closely related SIC code as you can find it. You can get your corporations formed and create your business plans, without somebody at First Tennessee or one of the bigger banks, freaking out. And like Rob says, financial services are available. They're just a little bit more on the slide. If you talk to the folks out in Colorado and California, there are ways around that.
And one other thing I would just very briefly add to that is understanding the difference between federal and state banking institutions. And a lot of the states, Florida being probably the primary example at this point, state level banking institutions are banking both ancillary and cannabis cultivating businesses. So depending on what your needs are, that may already be covered. One more.
As far as tax implications, I own a business as well. Now, so say for instance, I got into the cannabis space. All of the expenses, is there a way where you just out of those expenses, or?
So I think what you're talking about is 280E of the Internal Revenue Code.
Yes.
Which effectively provides that cannabis businesses can't deduct expenses but for cost of goods. So the short answer, which might be a little bit of a lawyer answer, is contact your lawyer. There are ways to structure these things so that tax impact is minimized. It's 7:27. I think we got time for one or two more.
I guess this is for Brent. What are your thoughts on investing in lab technologies for potency testing and pesticide testing and things like that?
I love that. I'm a big fan of that, and one of the medical tech companies that I was looking for, in order for them to actually measure dose control, they use the information that comes from the testing labs. So for it to actually be medical cannabis, it has to be medical grade. It can't just come out of a flower. That's the problem with a lot of flower being produced as legalized. It gets sent to those biotech companies, the analysis companies, breaks it down to a molecular level, puts it on, let's call it a QR code, and then once that gets pushed into a cartridge, some of them will tell you exactly what the chemical makeup of that plant is. So having the biotechs, having to the sciences of making this a pharmacological study for people, you have to have that science. So I very much believe in that and support where that's going to go in the industry.
Last question, Akbar.
Yes, you talked about the models in Canada and in Israel, but we're a big agricultural state. And is there a way forward for us, the non-greenhouse way, like they're doing in Jamaica, growing outside? Is that going to be something that's going to be doable for our farmers here and enrich the agriculture of the state? Is that a way forward in this state, outdoor growing? And does the Department of Agriculture limit? How does that work with them in terms of cannabis?
Sure. So I can give my answer, and then I'll open up the panelists. My answer is that technology is improving every day. Currently, in most states, you see the successful high-quality product being produced inside warehouses in indoor facilities. In some of the legal states, in Florida being a good example, you're already seeing a move towards outdoor grow houses, the hoop houses they're called, which is it's a greenhouse that has a half-circle metal frame and then it's covered with translucent plastic. Whether or not those hoop houses will ultimately be successful producing things that are not distillates. So what that means is that the actual flower, the bud, in Florida you can't sell the bud. You have to extract it and distill it down. So whether or not those sorts of facilities will be able to grow high quality buds, the actual flower that would compete with the indoor product is yet to be seen in my mind. And then taking that a step further, it's full outdoor. Right now, I don't think the technology is there to have super high quality stuff being grown outdoors, but that doesn't mean it won't come. It doesn't mean that genetic engineering or other modifications to the actual plant itself won't make it possible in the very near future. Opening up to the panelists, I think Brent wants to say something.
Yeah, I'd love to take this one. Let's look at the cannabis on multiple different levels. Let's look at the same as beer. You have the mass-produced Budweisers, and then you have the local brews around town. People don't always want to buy the high-end, high-quality, really nice alcohols. People aren't always going to want to buy the high-end $20 a gram cannabis. if it goes to that level. You know, some people might want the Marlboro greens that are mass produced in a huge field and don't have the highest THC content. So I feel like, just like with alcohol, just like with beers, we're gonna be able to do a similar demand for both. You're gonna have the boutique grows where marketing is going to be the only thing that sets you apart. Because let's be real, once you get to a certain level of cannabis, they're all the same. So the marketing is gonna set you apart. And then you have the mass production to be able to get the, let's call it the lower end, the least expensive end of the market, to be able to, for people that are wanting to buy quantity instead of quality. Now, when it comes to being inside of a grow room versus being outdoors, you can always grow a higher quality product when you can control your environment. If you can't control the sunlight, if you can't control the temperature, if you can't control the wind, if you can't control where the hot spots are on your plants, then you're going to struggle to produce a consistent all the way across. Now, with that being said, with this being a medical state, as it's all going to oils, you don't have to have that high quality, extremely potent THC content, CBD content that you're looking for out in Oregon or out in California, because it's all going to get put into an extractor and put into an oil anyway. So what that means is you can still have the same quality oil, it's just going to take you more cannabis. So you can, and what I'm finding a lot of people in other states are doing is to get everything set up to grow the medium quality cannabis, the greenhouses, if you will, the hoop houses, and then once the flower becomes legal, they are planning to expand into the warehouse where they can grow extremely high quality flower, because that's where the market is for that, what they're seeing.
All right, so I think we've done it again. Now we're past our extended time period. So just very quickly, we want to give each panelist 10 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds if they want to share one last thought before we close.
Not much more to say other than watch tomorrow to see what comes out of the budget negotiations. You'll probably see some news reports about whether there's a spending rider in there that protects medical marijuana and whether or not it's extended to recreational marijuana as well. And that should come out tomorrow.
Assuming you're for medical cannabis in Tennessee, work on those 9 folks, gave you the list, and then watch to see when it comes out of judiciary, being optimistic, if it gets assigned to the Senate Health Committee. That's a very real possibility. I think this gentleman's assuming it will. It's a very good assumption. We don't know yet. Certainly wouldn't know last night. If it goes to health, then the same thing. There's going to be, I think, probably 9 or 11 people on the Senate Health Committee, and just wear them out. And then you get out of those committees, you're probably going to have it in Tennessee.
Excellent suggestion. I'll just repeat that. Contact those people on that judiciary. Brian Kelsey, Lundberg will be tough. Janice Bowling is more open. So if you have
She's coming
friends,
around.
in Coffee County, Lincoln County, Moore, Grundy, anywhere to the south of us where she's at. I'll be in Tullahoma tomorrow night, working people in Janice Bowling's district. So if you know somebody, we'll be at Los Trejos in Tullahoma, which is Janice Bowling's hometown. So, thank you.
David, can I ask about the others while we're talking? There's Bell, Mike Bell,
I don't think we'll ever get Bell's vote.
Lee Harris, I assume we're okay?
Lee Harris is
Yes.
okay.
Sarah's okay?
Yep.
Carrie?
Yes. He's a yes. Pretty firm, yes.
Are there
Art,
others?
Art's still.
Art Swan, we don't know. I'm getting back up to
Hopefully the
Knoxville.
Frank Cagle thing will help him.
Yeah, the Frank Cagle article is really stellar. So in our social media efforts, and I didn't mention, Safe Access Tennessee is on Facebook. Safe Access Tennessee has a website, safeaccesstn.org. We share things like the Frank Cagle article, which is very powerful. I mean, he's an extremely well-known guy in Knoxville, and that was particularly helpful, that article yesterday.
Just to leave you 5 trends that I see happening really quick in the cannabis industry, just for y'all to watch out for. I think blockchain will severely disrupt the seed to sale tracking. You see a lot of companies out there that are coming to be able to track from seed to smoke, to be able to see what's happening. The blockchain technology, I'm not saying Bitcoin, I'm not saying Popcoin, I'm saying the blockchain technology behind them will have a significant impact. Baby boomers are going to start highly adopting the use of cannabis, and it's not going to be the flower. They do not want to have the stigma of having a flame and something green in front of their face. They're going to start using the topicals, the oils, the ingestibles, other ways to naturally treat the pain. You're going to start seeing branding for companies be a much more a larger differentiator as opposed to the product that they're selling. If you see a cannabis company and they have no branding versus another cannabis company, slightly worse product with better branding, they will be more successful. You will see the industry continue to consolidate. Major M&A activity will continue to rise because these smaller people are putting the money in. They're putting $10 million into their company and getting $43 million out, and everybody's happy. And you're going to see a significantly larger rise in the pharma-related CBD, THC research. You're going to start seeing some pharmaceuticals that will start to fight cancer, intravenous drugs that are going to start coming in and have a significant impact to maybe reduce some of what chemo has on the market or opioids have on the market. So those 5 trends I think you should watch out for and see what happens.
So thank you again to Lisa and the City Club, and thank you for your attention.
Just want to let everyone know, feel free to go back and look at the dining room. We still got food, the bar's still open.